This title is presented to you by Soundlibra.com. For more audiobooks like this, click the link in the description or visit our website at Soundlibra.com. Welcome to Fail Forward Fast. Mistakes can be your greatest teachers.
I'm Lisa. Today, we're kicking off our series by exploring something many of us dread: failure. Real quick before we start, just a reminder that while we're discussing personal growth and mindset, we aren't mental health professionals, so please treat this as a conversation and not as a substitute for professional medical or psychological advice.
That's an important distinction. Now, what if failure wasn't the end, but a powerful beginning? We've been conditioned to see failure as a sign of weakness, a dead end. Society often celebrates perfection, making us terrified of making a misstep. But that fear is what really holds us back.
It's true. We tiptoe around anything that might lead to an error, which means we also tiptoe around opportunities that involve risk and, therefore, potential learning. It's like we're afraid to try, or as you put it, afraid to fail forward fast.
The idea behind fail forward fast is that mistakes are inevitable, but they don't have to be final. They're actually rich sources of information if we only know how to mine them for the lessons they hold. Our ingrained fear of looking foolish, of not meeting expectations, that's a huge psychological barrier we need to overcome.
So, this first episode is all about understanding that fear and starting to dismantle it.
Precisely. We need to start by acknowledging the stigma. Think about it. If someone accomplishes something amazing, we gush about their success. But if they try something and it doesn't work out, we often either offer well-meaning but pitying condolences, or worse, privately judge them. This societal pressure to always appear successful creates a breeding ground for perfectionism, which is the enemy of growth.
And perfectionism, in turn, breeds a fear of failure. If you have to be perfect, any deviation from that is seen as, well, a failure. It's a vicious cycle.
It is, and it starts early. From childhood, we're often praised for getting things right and corrected when we get them wrong. While correction is important, we need to frame it as learning, not as a verdict on our capabilities. Imagine a child learning to walk. They stumble and fall dozens, even hundreds of times. Do we tell them, "That's it, you're not a walker, give up"? Of course not. We encourage them to get up and try again.
That's a great analogy, Alex. We understand that process for physical skills, but we often lack that same understanding and patience for intellectual or professional endeavors.
That's the core of it. We need to reframe our mindset. Instead of seeing a failed attempt as a definitive judgment on our abilities, we should see it as a waypoint, a piece of data. It tells us what doesn't work, which is just as valuable as knowing what does. It's like a scientist conducting an experiment. If the hypothesis isn't proven, it's not a failure of the scientist. It's a discovery that leads to new hypotheses.
So, rather than an endpoint, a failure becomes feedback.
Exactly. Feedback. And the faster we get that feedback, the faster we can adjust our course. That's where the fast in fail forward fast comes in. It's about minimizing the time between the misstep and the learning that follows. We don't want to dwell on the disappointment. We want to extract the lesson and move on.
But how do we do that, Alex? It sounds simple, but the emotional sting of failure can be really powerful. There's shame, embarrassment, disappointment, all these heavy feelings.
You've hit on a crucial point, the emotional aspect. We'll delve much deeper into conquering shame in a later episode. But for now, let's talk about initial recognition. When you experience a setback, the first step is to simply acknowledge it without judgment. Take a breath. Say to yourself, "Okay, that didn't go as planned."
Just that simple acknowledgement can be a powerful first step, can it? Instead of trying to pretend it didn't happen or beating yourself up about it.
Absolutely. And then we can start to ask questions. Not accusatory questions like, "Why am I so bad at this?" but curious questions like, "What happened here? What was my role in this outcome?" And critically, "What can I learn from this situation?" This shift from self-blame to curiosity is transformative.
It's like shifting from being a victim of the circumstance to being an investigator.
Precisely. And to illustrate this, let me share a very early, modest example from my own life. When I was in college, I was determined to win a public speaking competition. I practiced for weeks, agonized over every word, and felt I had crafted the most brilliant speech. I walked onto that stage with immense confidence. And then I froze completely. My mind went blank, I stammered, and I essentially mumbled my way through the end of the speech.
Oh, Alex, that sounds mortifying.
It felt like it at the time. I was so embarrassed. I wanted the ground to swallow me whole. In that moment, my immediate instinct was to never speak in public again. I felt like an absolute failure. But after a few days of wallowing, I started asking those questions. What happened? I asked myself. Well, I had put all my energy into what I was going to say, but not enough into how I would deliver it under pressure. I hadn't practiced speaking when nervous. I hadn't built in any mental anchors or fallback phrases for when my mind went blank.
So, your failure taught you something crucial about the process of public speaking that you hadn't considered.
Exactly. My fixation on the perfect script blinded me to the importance of performance under pressure. The lesson wasn't that I was a bad speaker. It was that I needed to develop different skills. That realization, that single insight, was the start of my journey towards becoming a more confident presenter. The embarrassment faded, but the lesson stuck.
That's a fantastic example. It highlights how a powerful experience can, with the right perspective, become a powerful teacher. It wasn't about the inability to speak, but about a gap in preparation that your failure revealed.
And that's the essence of embracing this philosophy. It's not about glorifying mistakes, but about recognizing their inevitable presence and, more importantly, their incredible potential for growth. We need to cultivate an environment, both internally and externally, where it's okay to experiment, to try, and yes, sometimes to fail. Because it's in those attempts, those imperfect stumbles, that we truly discover what we're capable of.
So, to recap this first episode, we've talked about how our society often instills a deep fear of failure, leading us to perfectionism and avoidance. We've also introduced the core idea of fail forward fast, seeing mistakes not as endpoints, but as valuable feedback that propels us forward. And Alex shared a personal anecdote that showed how a moment of supposed failure can, with a curious and investigative mindset, reveal critical lessons for future success.
That's a great summary, Lisa. This episode is about setting the foundation. We've identified the problem, our fear of failure, and introduced the core premise of the solution. We'll delve deeper into deconstructing failure next. We'll explore how to really dissect what happened and pull out the specific learnings. We don't want to just feel bad about failing. We want to understand why it happened.
Looking forward to that. Because I think breaking down those whys is where the real transformation begins.
Thanks for listening. Next episode, Deconstructing Failure. What did we really learn? Welcome back. Today, we deconstruct failure to understand its root causes.
That's right, Alex. Last week was about accepting that failures happen. This week is about figuring out why it happened and what we can do differently. It's about moving from disappointment to proactive learning.
Exactly, Lisa. The key is to shift our focus from blame to understanding. We need to become learning detectives, like scientists analyzing experimental results.
So, instead of thinking, I'm such an idiot, I failed, we should be asking, what specific actions or decisions led to this outcome? That feels much more constructive.
Precisely. And to do this effectively, we need to implement rapid learning cycles. This means quick analysis and even quicker action after a setback. Imagine baking a cake that comes out flat. You don't give up on baking. You immediately ask if the oven was wrong or if you overmixed the batter. You pinpoint the issue and adjust.
So, this rapid learning cycle involves acknowledging the failure without judgment, analyzing the what and the why, and then figuring out what to do next.
You've got it. And to get to that why, we use a method called the 5 whys. You start with the problem and ask why as many times as it takes to reach the fundamental reason.
The 5 whys. It sounds straightforward, but it can be challenging when emotions are high after a failure.
It certainly can, which is why the first step is crucial. Creating a safe space for honest reflection, often through journaling. Writing things down externalizes your thoughts, allowing you to examine them.
Journaling. So, when something doesn't go as planned, I should grab a notebook and start writing. What kinds of questions should I be asking myself?
Ask factual questions to describe the situation. Start with what was the situation? Then, what was the intended outcome? Next, what actually happened? This objective description is the foundation. After that, we begin the why investigation.
So, if my intended outcome was to launch a marketing campaign that brought in 1,000 new customers, but we only got 100, I'd write down those facts. Then, the why questions begin.
Exactly. You'd ask, why did we only get 100 new customers? Let's say the answer is, the ads weren't compelling enough to click on. That's your first why. Now for the second why. Why weren't the ads compelling enough? Perhaps the answer is, our target audience wasn't the primary focus of the ad copy.
So we're drilling down. First, why? Not compelling ads. Second, why? Wrong target audience in the copy. What's next?
Third, why? Why was our target audience not the focus of the ad copy? Maybe the response is, the marketing team felt the broader message would appeal to more people. Now, the fourth why did the marketing team feel that way? It could be they were pressured to deliver results quickly and opted for a perceived safer approach.
And the fifth, why? The root cause?
It might be there was a lack of clear strategic instruction on prioritizing specific customer segments in this campaign, leading to a team decision based on perceived urgency rather than long-term effectiveness. See how we moved from a surface-level issue, ads weren't compelling, to a systemic issue, lack of clear strategic instruction?
That's incredibly insightful. You've transformed a single failure into a learning opportunity about strategic communication and team direction. It shifts the entire perspective. It's not about a bad ad, it's about how we set up our teams for success.
Precisely. And that's the beauty of deconstructing failure. It's about identifying the underlying processes, assumptions, and decisions that led to the outcome. This enables us to make targeted improvements that prevent similar failures in the future.
This makes me think about how we can integrate this into our daily lives. Even small setbacks, like forgetting to pick up groceries, can be analyzed. Why did I forget? Because I was rushing. Why was I rushing? Because I hit snooze this morning. Why did I hit snooze? Because I didn't get enough sleep. And so on.
Exactly. It's about building a habit of inquiry. And when you start seeing patterns in your whys, for instance, if not enough sleep keeps coming up, you know where to focus your energy for larger personal growth. This is also where we learn to differentiate between a genuine mistake and a symptom of a deeper issue.
So, it's not just about identifying the immediate cause, but the foundational cause. And the 5 whys are a fantastic tool for that. What are some other techniques we can use for this deconstruction process, Alex?
Another powerful technique is creating a failure review board, even if it's just you or you and a trusted friend or colleague. This board's sole purpose is to objectively examine what happened. No accusations, no judgment, just a neutral space to discuss the facts and the learnings. You ask questions like, what went well? Because even in failure, there are often elements that worked. What could have gone better? And what will we do differently next time?
I like that. Focusing on what went well is important too, so we don't get completely bogged down in the negative. It helps maintain perspective.
Absolutely. And these frameworks, like the 5 whys and the failure review board, help us move from a reactive mode, "Oh no, I failed," to a proactive mode, "Okay, let's dissect this and learn." This proactive approach is what allows us to truly learn from our mistakes and, as our book title suggests, fail forward fast.
So, to recap for our listeners, we've talked about shifting from blame to understanding. We introduced the rapid learning cycle, focusing on quick analysis and action after a setback. We explored the 5 whys technique to get to the root cause of a failure and the importance of journaling to facilitate honest reflection.
And we also touched upon creating a failure review board as a way to systematically examine what happened, what worked, and what to do differently. The goal is always to extract actionable insights. It's about transforming that moment of failure into a stepping stone for future success.
It's like looking at a messy room, and instead of just feeling overwhelmed, you systematically break down the task. First, clear the surfaces, then sort the clothes, then put things away. Each step is manageable and leads to the desired clean room.
A perfect analogy, Lisa. This process of deconstruction is the engine that drives real growth. It's not enough to just have an experience. We must process that experience to gain wisdom.
So, in essence, after an episode of failure, we need to become our own best investigators, asking probing questions to uncover the why and set ourselves up for a different outcome next time.
That's the core of it. By diligently deconstructing our failures, we're not just learning from past mistakes. We're actively building the skills and resilience needed to navigate future challenges.
This is really powerful stuff, Alex. It's about making failure a productive, rather than a purely negative, experience.
Exactly. And building on this foundation, we'll focus on the critical next step, creating a robust post-failure action plan. Next episode, the power of the post-failure action plan. Welcome back to Fail Forward Fast. I'm Alex.
And I'm Lisa. Last time, we really dug into deconstructing failure, looking at what we actually learned from our experiences. It was all about that clear-eyed analysis after the fact.
Exactly. We moved beyond just feeling bad and started asking, okay, what were the specific breakdown points? What were the lessons embedded in that experience? Today, we're shifting gears. We're moving from just understanding failure to actively leveraging it.
So, we're not just reflecting anymore, we're doing. What's the big idea for this episode, Alex?
The big idea is the power of the post-failure action plan. Think of it as your roadmap out of the disappointment zone and back onto the path of progress. It's about taking those insights we gained last time and turning them into something tangible, something actionable.
A post-failure action plan. That sounds organized, almost like a strategic retreat after battle, but a productive one.
That's a fantastic analogy, Lisa. It's not just about a vague resolution to try harder. It's a structured, intentional process. It's about designing your next attempt, your next iteration, with the wisdom of hindsight.
So, how does this plan actually work? What are the key components?
Great question. The first step, and this builds directly on our last episode, is to revisit those core learnings. What were the absolute, undeniable truths you uncovered about what went wrong? You want to distill them down to their essence. For instance, if you tried a new marketing campaign and it flopped, a learning might be, our target audience doesn't respond to this particular social media platform.
Right. Not just the campaign failed, but the campaign failed because we were on the wrong platform for our audience. Specificity is key.
Precisely. From those specific learnings, the next vital step is to set clear, revised objectives for your next attempt. These objectives need to be concrete. They should directly address the learnings. So, if the learning was about the wrong platform, a revised objective might be reach potential customers on platform X, which our analysis shows they frequent more, aiming for a 15% engagement rate.
Okay, so we've got our distilled learnings and we've got our new, specific objectives. This is starting to feel very much like turning a setback into a strategic pivot.
Absolutely. And to make sure this plan isn't just a wish list, the third critical component is defining how you'll measure your success this time around. How will you know if you're actually making progress towards those revised objectives?
I imagine this is where we connect back to our analytical steps from episode 2. If we identified quantifiable metrics for what went wrong, we should be able to do the same for what's going right.
Exactly. We need to establish what success looks like in practice. So, for a marketing example, the measurement might be tracking click-through rates on a new platform, counting new leads generated from it, or monitoring positive sentiment and comments on that platform. These are your new indicators of progress.
So, to recap, the post-failure action plan has 3 main pillars: distilling our core learnings, setting clear and revised objectives, and defining how we'll measure success. It's about being intentional and data-driven after a failure.
Yes, intentional and data-driven. Another way to think about it is like a scientist. A scientist doesn't give up when an experiment doesn't yield the expected result. They analyze the failed experiment, hypothesize why it failed, and then design a new experiment with a specific, measurable outcome. That's what we're doing here.
I like that scientific approach. It takes the emotional sting out of failure and replaces it with a curious, problem-solving mindset.
And that mindset is powerful because when you have a plan, when you know what you're trying to achieve next and how you'll know you're getting there, it's much harder to get derailed by fear or self-doubt.
It gives you a concrete path forward. Instead of just feeling stuck, you have steps to take. It's like having a compass and a map after being lost in the woods.
Precisely. And importantly, this isn't a rigid, unbreakable decree. This plan is a living document. As you implement it, you might gather new information. You might discover that your revised objectives need further tweaking, or your measurement methods aren't quite capturing what you need.
So, the action plan itself is a subject for iteration and learning?
Exactly. It's a cycle. You analyze, you plan, you act, you measure, and then you analyze again based on the results of your action. This is where fail forward fast really comes alive. You're not waiting for a big, catastrophic failure to learn. You're building small, iterative steps of learning into your process.
It's about continuously refining your approach. It sounds like this plan provides a framework for resilience. When you have a clear plan, you're less likely to be knocked completely off course by a setback.
That's absolutely right, Lisa. The plan acts as an anchor. It reminds you of your purpose and your next steps, even when things feel uncertain. It reinforces the idea that failure isn't an endpoint, but a data point that informs the next move.
So, for our listeners, the takeaway today is to actively create a plan after a failure. Don't just dwell on what went wrong, but use those lessons to define specific, measurable steps for moving forward.
Exactly. Take that analysis we talked about last time and translate it into concrete action. If you failed at a task, ask yourself, what are the 3 most important things I learned? What is the one specific revised goal for my next attempt? And what are the 2 key metrics I will use to track my progress? Having that structured approach can make all the difference.
It's the difference between being a passive recipient of bad outcomes and an active architect of future success. It's about taking back control.
And that's the essence of failing forward fast. It's not about avoiding failure, but about making it an integral, productive part of your growth process. You analyze, you plan, you act, and you learn.
So, to briefly recap what we've covered today, we explored the post-failure action plan, a structured approach to turning lessons learned into actionable steps. We identified its 3 core components: distilling learnings, setting clear objectives, and defining measurement methods. And we emphasized that this plan is a dynamic tool for continuous improvement and building resilience.
That's a perfect summary, Lisa. By embracing this structured approach, you transform setbacks into stepping stones.
This has been so practical, Alex. I can definitely see how this plan will help listeners move beyond the frustration of failure and into a proactive mode.
And that's the goal. Next episode, we're going to tackle something many people struggle with after a failure, the shame monster. We'll be discussing forgiveness and the crucial steps for truly moving on.
Conquering shame. That sounds like a very important conversation.
It really is. So, join us next time for episode 4, Conquering the Shame Monster. Welcome back to Fail Forward Fast. Last time, we dove deep into actionable plans after failure. Today, we're tackling shame.
Shame.
It's that heavy, sinking feeling, isn't it? That voice telling you, you're not good enough. It can be paralyzing.
Exactly. And that's why we need to confront it. Shame is often the biggest roadblock. It convinces us that the failure defines us, not just our actions.
So, how do we even begin to conquer this shame monster? It feels like a formidable opponent.
It is. But like any challenge, we can break it down. The first step is recognizing shame for what it is, an emotion, not a permanent judgment. It's a signal, not a sentence.
A signal, not a sentence. So, instead of accepting it as truth, we acknowledge it as a feeling.
Precisely. Think of learning to surf. You fall, you get tumbled. You wouldn't tell yourself, I'm a terrible surfer. You'd recognize the falls as part of learning. Shame is like the emotional equivalent of that initial wipeout.
That's a great analogy. We tend to internalize failure harshly when it comes to our careers or personal goals. The stakes feel higher.
They do. And when the stakes feel high, so does the potential for shame. This is where self-compassion comes in. We need to treat ourselves with the same kindness we would offer a friend who made a mistake.
Self-compassion. That feels counterintuitive to the get tough and push through mentality.
It can, but is berating yourself really motivating you, or just making you feel worse? True motivation often comes from a place of inner strength and understanding, which self-compassion fosters. It's about acknowledging the pain of failure without adding self-criticism.
Okay, so how do we practice self-compassion?
No, it's an active practice. One way is through mindful self-awareness. Notice when you're being self-critical. What are you saying to yourself? Is it helpful? Is it kind? Just that awareness is powerful.
So, externalizing that negative inner monologue.
Exactly. Then, common humanity. This is the understanding that failure and suffering are part of the shared human experience. You are not alone in your mistakes. Everyone messes up. When you can connect with that, it diminishes the isolating sting of shame.
That ties back to what we talked about earlier. When you feel shame, it seems like you're the only one who ever made such a mistake. Realizing everyone experiences this is grounding.
Absolutely. And finally, mindfulness, which is observing your thoughts and feelings without judgment. You see the thought of shame, you acknowledge its presence, but you don't have to grab onto it.
So, a three-pronged approach to self-compassion: being aware of your struggles, recognizing you're not alone, and observing your feelings without judgment.
You've got it. And hand in hand with self-compassion is forgiveness. Not just forgiving others, but crucially, forgiving ourselves.
Self-forgiveness. That's a tough one. It feels like we're punishing ourselves to ensure we don't repeat the mistake.
I understand that. But holding on to guilt and shame doesn't prevent future mistakes. It just hinders our ability to learn and grow. Self-forgiveness isn't saying the failure was okay. It's acknowledging you did the best you could with what you had, and now you know better.
So it's about releasing the burden of past actions to focus on making better choices.
Precisely. And how we do that? It often starts with a clear, honest reflection on what happened. What were the contributing factors? What was within your control and what wasn't? Without assigning blame, simply understanding the situation.
And then what? You don't just magically feel forgiven.
No, it's a process. One technique is to write a letter of forgiveness to yourself. In this letter, you can express what you acknowledge about the mistake, extend compassion for your actions, and then formally grant yourself release. The act of writing it is potent.
A letter to yourself. That sounds like a really concrete way to externalize the act of forgiving.
It is. And remember that forgiveness isn't a one-time event. It requires ongoing care.
We've talked about self-compassion and self-forgiveness. What are some practical ways we can actively release the grip of shame?
One powerful strategy is to reframe the narrative. Instead of focusing on the shame, focus on the lessons learned and the resilience you've built. Remember that post-failure action plan we discussed last time? That's your narrative of moving forward.
So, actively tell yourself the story of what you learned and how you're growing, rather than dwelling on the embarrassment.
Exactly. And also, practicing vulnerability. Sharing your experiences with trusted friends, mentors, or a therapist can significantly reduce the power of shame. When others respond with understanding, it validates your experience and diminishes the shame.
That's so true. Sometimes just saying it out loud to someone who cares can take away so much of its power. It makes it real, but also manageable.
It does. And finally, celebrating small wins. Actively look for and acknowledge any progress, any positive step you take. This builds momentum and counteracts shame's tendency to make you feel stuck.
So, to recap for our listeners, conquering the shame monster involves embracing self compassion through mindful awareness, recognizing common humanity, and observing our feelings without judgment. It also requires practicing self forgiveness by honestly reflecting on the situation and actively granting ourselves release.
And then, to truly let go, we reframe our narrative towards lessons learned, practice vulnerability by sharing with trusted individuals, and celebrate those small wins that chip away at the shame's hold. It's about consistently choosing to move forward.
It sounds like a continuous journey, but an incredibly rewarding one. Learning to forgive ourselves feels like unlocking a new level of personal freedom.
Absolutely. Because once we release the shame, we free up so much energy to focus on growth and our next endeavor. We truly fail forward when we're not weighed down by the emotional baggage of our stumbles.
Well said, Alex. So, we've covered the emotional hurdles of failure, shame, self compassion, and forgiveness. Next episode, we're going to shift our focus to something that fuels our ability to overcome these challenges: grit. We'll explore how to build unshakable resilience in episode 5.
Welcome back to Fail Forward Fast. Last time, we delved into conquering the shame monster that often follows a setback, and how forgiveness is key to moving on. Today, we're building on that foundation to discuss something truly powerful: unshakable resilience. We're going to explore the grit factor and how to cultivate it.
Resilience. It's a word we hear a lot, but what does it really mean when we're talking about bouncing back from failure? It's not about being unaffected by difficulties, is it?
Exactly. Resilience isn't about having a thick skin that deflects every difficult experience. It's about what happens after you've been knocked down. It's the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties, to adapt to adversity, and to keep moving forward. Think of it like a rubber band. It can stretch and stretch, but it always snaps back to its original shape. Or even stronger, sometimes.
I like that analogy. So, it's actively bending without breaking. And you mentioned the grit factor. What exactly is grit in this context? It sounds tough.
Grit is fundamentally about passion and perseverance for long-term goals. It's having a kind of stubborn determination that keeps you going even when things are incredibly tough. It's not just talent. It's applying yourself consistently towards goals that matter to you. Grit is that inner drive that says, I will not give up.
So, it's not just about toughing it out for a short while, but about consistent effort over a long period. Like training for a marathon, not just sprinting a mile.
Precisely. And it's deeply connected to a growth mindset. Remember, a growth mindset is the belief that our abilities and intelligence can be developed through dedication and hard work. People with a growth mindset see challenges not as roadblocks, but as opportunities to learn and grow. This is the bedrock of resilience.
That makes so much sense. If you believe you can improve, then a stumble isn't a permanent state. It's just part of the learning journey. So, how do we actually build this resilience, this grit? It's not like we can just flip a switch.
You're absolutely right. It's a practice. One of the most effective ways is through actively cultivating perseverance. This means setting challenging, yet achievable goals. When you pursue these goals, you're going to face obstacles. The key is how you respond. Instead of getting discouraged and quitting, you learn to see these obstacles as puzzles to solve.
So, it's about reframing the challenge. Instead of thinking, this is too hard, I can't do it, it becomes, this is hard. How can I figure it out?
Exactly. And this ties directly into what we discussed last time about overcoming shame. When you've learned to forgive yourself for past failures, you're less afraid of future ones. This lack of fear is crucial for perseverance. You're not paralyzed by the possibility of messing up, so you're more willing to try, to push, and to persevere.
That's a powerful connection. So, forgiving yourself frees you up to be more resilient. What else can we do?
Another key component is developing adaptability. Life is unpredictable. Things rarely go exactly as planned. Resilience means being able to adjust your course, to change your approach when circumstances demand it, without losing sight of your ultimate objective. Think of a sailor adjusting their sails to catch the wind, no matter which way it blows.
That's a great visual. So, it's not about stubbornly clinging to one rigid plan, but being flexible enough to navigate changing conditions.
Yes, and to support this adaptability, we need to build strong support systems. Connecting with others, whether friends, family, or mentors, provides invaluable perspective and encouragement. When you're feeling overwhelmed, talking to someone who believes in you can make all the difference. They can offer a different viewpoint, remind you of your strengths, or simply lend an ear.
Having that sounding board is so important. It's like having a cheerleader in your corner when doubt starts creeping in.
Precisely. Now, let's bring this into practice. I recommend a simple exercise, the grit journal. At the end of each day, or perhaps at the end of each week, reflect on a challenge you faced. What was it? How did you react? Did you persevere? If not, what did you have done differently? What did you learn?
A grit journal. I can see how that would help. It forces you to actively analyze your responses to challenges.
Absolutely. It trains your brain to look for the lessons, to identify areas for improvement, and to celebrate those moments of perseverance, no matter how small. Over time, this regular reflection builds a habit of resilient thinking.
And what about dealing with setbacks directly? When something goes wrong, it feels instinctive to want to retreat.
It does. And that's where the idea of a bounce back ritual comes in. This is a pre planned, short activity you engage in immediately after experiencing a setback. It could be 5 minutes of deep breathing, going for a brisk walk, listening to an uplifting song, or even just writing down 3 things you're grateful for. The goal is to interrupt the negative spiral and reset your emotional state.
A bounce back ritual. I like that. It's like a built in reset button. So, it's about emotional regulation in the moment.
Exactly. And by repeatedly practicing these rituals, you train your brain to associate bounce back actions with overcoming challenges. The more you do it, the more automatic it becomes. This practice, over time, directly builds your resilience muscle. It's like going to the gym for your mind.
So, to recap, we're talking about resilience as the ability to recover and adapt after failure. It's fueled by grit, that passionate perseverance for long-term goals. And we build it through setting challenging goals and persevering, embracing a growth mindset, developing adaptability, nurturing strong support systems, keeping a grit journal, and establishing bounce-back rituals. It sounds like actively practicing these things helps us become tougher, not in a hardened way, but in a more robust and adaptable way.
You got it, Lisa. And the wonderful paradox is that the more you embrace failure and learn from it, the less fearful you become. This makes you more willing to take risks, to try new things, and ultimately, to achieve more. Your history of failing forward actually becomes your greatest asset in building unshakable resilience. It's not the absence of failure, but the presence of grit and the practice of resilience that define success.
That's a fantastic takeaway. It's empowering to know that our struggles can be the very things that make us stronger.
Indeed. So, remember, resilience isn't a trait you're born with. It's a skill you develop. By consciously practicing perseverance, adaptability, and self-forgiveness, you're building that inner strength.
And we can start doing that today with just a few small, consistent actions.
Exactly. Next episode, we're going to hear some incredible stories from the front lines, where people have experienced significant failures and used them as launching pads for amazing achievements. You won't want to miss it. Next episode, stories from the front lines, inspiring failures. Welcome back to Fail Forward Fast. Today, we're bringing our ideas to life with inspiring stories.
Yes, Alex. We're about to share real-world examples of people who faced major setbacks and used them as stepping stones. It's about proving failure isn't an end, but often a step toward success.
Absolutely. Let's start with Thomas Edison. Developing the light bulb, he famously said, "I have not failed. I just found 10,000 ways that won't work." Each attempt wasn't a dead end. It was data.
10,000 ways that won't work. That's a powerful reframing. Instead of personal failing, he saw it as a process of elimination, learning what not to do. How many of us would continue after 100 failed attempts?
Exactly. Edison's example shows a mindset shift. He wasn't focused on the sting of failure, but on his goal of illumination. Keeping the objective in sight and viewing setbacks as necessary steps is key. His journey to innovation wasn't a straight line.
It really wasn't. Now for entrepreneurship. Colonel Sanders, KFC's founder. Harlan Sanders faced over 1,000 rejections for his chicken recipe. He was in his 60s, traveling, trying to convince owners to use his blend of spices.
1,000 rejections. It's almost unimaginable. With only his Social Security check supporting him, he relentlessly pursued his vision. Most would have quit. But for Colonel Sanders, each no was just a person who hadn't yet seen the potential. He believed his product and kept going.
And we all know KFC's global success. His story shows incredible perseverance and believing in your value, even when others don't. That deep conviction fuels you through repeated denials.
Truly inspiring. J.K. Rowling is another incredible example. Before Harry Potter's global fame, she was a single mother struggling financially, living on state benefits. She faced numerous rejections from publishers. Imagine holding onto that magical world and believing it was worth sharing, despite agents saying no repeatedly.
That one really resonates. She'd written the manuscript, poured her heart into it, but faced rejection after rejection. It's easy to get discouraged when your work is met with disappointment. Her story highlights believing in your creative vision, even when gatekeepers don't immediately see it.
Her tenacity is amazing. She was rejected by 12 different publishers before Bloomsbury accepted Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. 12 no's to overcome. And think about the impact that decision and her perseverance have had on generations of readers and the publishing world.
It's a powerful reminder that setbacks can be temporary, and the right opportunity might be just around the corner. It's about continuing to push forward with purpose.
Speaking of pushing forward, let's look at R.H. Macy, founder of the famous Macy's department store. He tried several businesses before Macy's, and they all failed. One general store even went bankrupt, losing all his capital. But he didn't let that defeat him.
That's a major failure for such a foundational business story. What did he do after losing everything?
He used the lessons learned from those failures, like understanding customer desires and merchandising, to start anew. He began with a small dry goods store in New York City, and with his retail and marketing insight, he built it into the iconic Macy's empire. His early failures provided invaluable business knowledge.
So he didn't just try again, he applied what he learned. That's the deconstructing failure concept in practice. He analyzed mistakes and built upon that knowledge. It's like learning to ride a bike. You fall, you adjust your balance for the next attempt.
Precisely. And let's broaden our view to collective failure and learning. Consider the Apollo 13 mission. While we focus on the successful moon landings, Apollo 13 is a prime example of a mission that went disastrously wrong. An explosion in the service module crippled the spacecraft.
Oh, that's a great example of facing a crisis. They didn't land on the moon, but the mission became about survival.
Exactly. The astronauts and mission control faced an unprecedented crisis. They had to improvise, innovate under extreme pressure, and work together using all their intelligence and resourcefulness to bring the crew home safely. This failure to land on the moon became an incredible success story in problem solving, engineering, and human resilience. Lessons learned from that near disaster have been applied to countless situations.
That's a fantastic point, Alex. It wasn't the failure of the objective, but the failure of the primary system they had to overcome. Their success was in their response, their adaptability, and collaboration. It shows that sometimes our greatest learning comes not from achieving our goal, but from how we navigate unexpected detours and challenges.
It truly does. These stories, Edison, Colonel Sanders, J.K. Rowling, R.H. Macy, and the Apollo 13 crew, share a common thread. They faced significant obstacles, moments where many would have faltered and quit. But they didn't. They saw their failures not as judgments, but as opportunities to learn, grow, and achieve something remarkable.
And they teach us that perseverance, a positive mindset, and adaptability are key. It's about reframing failure as feedback, a necessary part of the journey toward mastery and success. These aren't just anecdotes, they're blueprints for how to fail forward fast. They confirm that often our biggest breakthroughs follow our most significant setbacks.
So, as you face your own challenges, remember these stories. Remember, failure isn't the opposite of success, it's part of the path. Keep learning, keep adapting, and keep moving forward.
Next episode, we'll explore how to cultivate that crucial experimental mindset, embracing the unknown and being open to trying new things, even when the outcome isn't guaranteed.
Welcome back to Fail Forward Fast. Our last episode shared inspiring stories of failure turned into triumph. Now, let's explore a mindset that makes those stories more likely.
We've discussed dealing with failure and building resilience. But what if we could approach things differently to lessen the fear of failure from the start?
Exactly. Today, we're cultivating an experimental mindset. It means viewing life and work as hypotheses to test, like a curious scientist.
That scientist analogy is great. Instead of fearing wrong answers, we look forward to seeing what happens. This builds on our action plans, right?
Yes. In episode 3, We plan steps after setbacks. The experimental mindset builds testing grounds beforehand. It's proactive curiosity.
How do we cultivate this? Experiment sounds intimidating, like needing complex equipment.
Many think so, but we experiment daily. Trying a new recipe is an experiment. Hypothesis: more spice equals better taste. You test it and get data, deliciousness or a disaster.
I've had my share of culinary disasters. So it's about breaking big goals into smaller, testable actions.
Precisely. It starts with embracing uncertainty. We crave certainty, wanting to know the outcome. But uncertainty is where learning happens. We can't learn if we already know.
So we learn to be comfortable with not knowing. How does this reduce the fear of failure?
If you see an outcome as data, not success or failure, it changes everything. A failed experiment isn't about your worth. It's just information. It tells you what doesn't work or works differently.
Information that informs your next step, your next experiment. It opens new paths instead of being a dead end.
Crucial for innovation. Companies with an experimental mindset try new things. They launch, gather feedback, and iterate, treating each launch as a learning opportunity.
For listeners, whether career, skills, or relationships, this mindset encourages boldness. What if I tried this? Replaces, what if this goes wrong?
It's not recklessness, but intelligent risk-taking. We're not jumping off cliffs. It's about calculated experiments, doing homework, setting objectives, and defining success beforehand.
To recap, an experimental mindset means viewing life as hypotheses. We embrace uncertainty, reframe failure as data, and use it for next steps. This reduces fear and fuels innovation.
Exactly. To cultivate this, first, reframe failure. Instead of "I failed," try "that hypothesis was disproven," or "this approach didn't work as expected."
That language shift is subtle but significant, impacting our internal narrative.
It absolutely does. Then practice asking questions. Instead of "this is the only way," ask "what if we tried this?" or "what are other approaches?" Explore alternatives.
Actively questioning our assumptions. What else?
Build small experiments in your daily life. Try a new route, order something different, or learn something new for 10 minutes. These are low-stakes learning opportunities.
Great, tangible examples. It's like building an experimenting muscle.
Yes, for larger challenges, break them down. What one tiny thing can you try today? What data can you gather from that small action?
This connects to the iterative nature of growth. We don't need first try perfection. We just need to start and learn as we go.
To do that, cultivate playfulness. When playing, mistakes matter less. Approach challenges with curiosity. Imagine your project was a game. What's the most fun way to test a new strategy?
That's wonderful. It shifts us from pressure and fear to curiosity and engagement. The unknown becomes an exciting frontier.
The unknown holds innovation and growth. Sticking to what we know limits us. Embracing the unknown, experimentally, lets us discover unimaginable possibilities.
So, to recap today's episode on cultivating an experimental mindset, viewing life as hypotheses, not fixed outcomes, is key. This means embracing uncertainty, reframing failure as data, and practicing intelligent risk-taking.
We discussed how to do this by changing language, asking questions, building small experiments, breaking down goals, and bringing playfulness. It's about turning the unknown into a landscape for discovery.
This proactive approach to learning truly lets us fail forward fast. It minimizes setback sting and maximizes learning. Be brave enough to try, wise enough to learn.
This experimental mindset is fundamental to continuous improvement and innovation. Every experience is a stepping stone.
So, listeners, ask those what if questions today. Try one small experiment. See what data you collect.
Next episode, we'll explore the art of the pivot, how to intelligently course correct when experiments lead in unexpected directions. Welcome back to Fail Forward Fast. Last time, we explored cultivating an experimental mindset.
That's right. We emphasized failure isn't the end, but a signpost. And that leads us perfectly into today's episode, episode 8. We're talking about something incredibly important when experiments don't go as planned, the art of the pivot.
Exactly. So, what is a pivot and why is it so vital? Think of it like this. You're on a journey, driving toward a destination. You have directions, you're following a chosen path. But suddenly, you hit an unexpected roadblock.
A dead end. Or you realize the road is leading you so far off course that you'll never reach your destination. What do? Do you keep slamming your car into the roadblock?
Ideally, no. You stop, assess, and find a new route. That's the essence of a pivot. It's a deliberate change in direction. It's not giving up, but rather intelligently course correcting based on new information. You learn something from the roadblock, and now you use that knowledge to find a better way forward.
So, a pivot is a strategic decision, not just a panicked reaction. How do we distinguish between a smart pivot, born from learning, and a hasty retreat where we just run away from a challenge?
That's a fantastic question, Lisa, and it gets to the heart of it. A strategic pivot is informed. It's based on data, on feedback, on the lessons learned from what didn't work. It's about seeing that the original plan, the original path, is no longer the most effective way to achieve your goals, or perhaps your goals themselves have evolved. A hasty retreat, on the other hand, is often driven by fear or a lack of willingness to face the consequences of a setback.
So, before we even consider pivoting, we need to have done our initial work. We need to have gathered information from the experiment that failed.
Absolutely. Remember when we talked about embracing the experimental mindset? This is where that really pays off. You've set out to test a hypothesis. Maybe the results weren't what you expected. That's not a failure of the experiment. It's a successful gathering of data. The data tells you something. It might tell you that your initial assumption was wrong, or that the market isn't ready, or that your approach needs a significant tweak.
Okay, so we've gathered our failure data. What are the signs that tell us it's time to pivot, rather than just pushing harder on the same path?
There are several key indicators. First, consistent, predictable negative results. If you've tried something multiple times with the same outcome, and that outcome is not serving your purpose, it's a strong signal. Second, a fundamental shift in the environment. Think about market trends, technological advancements, or even changes in your own circumstances. If your original path is no longer relevant or viable in the current landscape, a pivot is necessary.
That makes sense. If the world has changed, your strategy probably needs to change too.
Precisely. Another sign is a lack of positive feedback or engagement. If you're not getting the traction you expected, and you've tried to adjust your approach within the existing framework without success, it might be time to consider a different direction altogether. And finally, a persistent feeling of disconnect. If what you're doing feels like a constant uphill battle, and you're not feeling that sense of progress or purpose anymore, it's worth examining if a pivot could reignite that energy.
Those are great indicators. So once we recognize the need to pivot, how do we actually do it intelligently? It's not just about jumping to the next shiny object.
Indeed, a structured approach is vital. First, define your new direction. Based on what you've learned, what is the most logical and promising alternative? This might involve a slight adjustment to your product or service, targeting a different customer segment, or even a more significant shift in your business model or personal development goals. It's about choosing a path that is aligned with the lessons learned.
So it's not a wild guess. It's an informed recalculation.
Exactly. Second, validate your new direction. Before you go all in on the pivot, test it. Run smaller experiments, gather feedback, and see if this new path shows more promise. This is where we apply the principles from episode 7 again. We're using the experimental mindset to test our pivot before fully committing.
That's smart. It prevents us from just jumping from one failure to another. We're still learning and iterating.
Right. Third, communicate your pivot. If you're working with a team, or if your pivot impacts others, clear communication is essential. Explain why the pivot is necessary. what the new direction is, and what you hope to achieve. Transparency builds trust and ensures everyone is on board.
And fourth,
Fourth, and this is crucial, is to execute with conviction, but with continued observation. Once you've decided on your pivot, commit to it, but don't become rigid. Keep gathering feedback. Keep observing the results. The journey isn't over. It's simply on a new, better informed route. And be prepared to pivot again if necessary. True resilience isn't just about sticking to a plan, it's about adapting effectively when the plan needs to change.
it sounds like a continuous cycle of learning, adapting, and moving forward. It's the fail forward fast philosophy in action, applied to a change in direction.
That's a perfect way to put it, Lisa. It's about recognizing that sometimes the best way to succeed is to intelligently change course. Think of companies that have undergone significant pivots. They saw that their initial product or strategy wasn't working as they'd hoped. Instead of shutting down, they analyzed their situation, learned from their missteps, and steered in a new direction. Often, that new direction is what leads to their ultimate success.
And it applies to us personally too, doesn't it? It's not just for businesses. If a particular career path isn't fulfilling or a relationship strategy isn't working, knowing when and how to pivot is essential for our own growth and happiness.
Absolutely. It's about building that inner compass that helps us navigate life's inevitable detours. So, to recap, a pivot is an intelligent course correction, not a hasty retreat. It's informed by the lessons learned from previous attempts. We recognize the need to pivot when we see consistent negative results, environmental shifts, lack of engagement, or a persistent feeling of disconnect.
And the steps for a smart pivot are defining the new direction based on learned lessons, validating that new direction with further experiments, communicating the change clearly, and then executing with conviction while remaining open to further adaptation.
You've got it. Embracing the art of the pivot means we are active participants in our own journey of growth, rather than passive victims of circumstance. We're not just failing, we're learning how to fail smarter and ultimately how to succeed.
That's a powerful thought to end on. Next episode, we'll be exploring failure in relationships and how we can use those experiences for profound personal growth.
Looking forward to it. Thanks for listening. Welcome back, everyone, to Fail Forward Fast. We're on episode 9.
It's true, Alex. We've spent so much time talking about professional failures, business blunders, and project missteps. But our personal lives, our connections with others, and our own development are just as susceptible to things going wrong. And sometimes, the emotions tied to those failures feel much bigger.
Absolutely. Think about it. A misunderstanding with a partner, a harsh word spoken in anger to a friend, or even just not living up to our own expectations for personal development. These can sting. But just like with our work, the fail forward fast mindset can be incredibly powerful here. It's all about learning and growing rather than getting stuck in the regret.
So, how do we apply this concept of failing forward to our relationships? It feels different than, say, a marketing campaign that didn't hit its target.
That's a great point, Lisa. The core principle remains the same. Focus on the learning opportunity. In relationships, a failure might look like a significant disagreement, a hurt feeling, or a breach of trust. Instead of dwelling on who is right or wrong, or replaying the painful moment endlessly, we need to ask, what can I learn from this interaction?
And what kind of things could we learn? It's easy to say learn from it, but what does that actually look like when emotions are running high?
It looks like self-awareness. For example, maybe during an argument, you realize you tend to get defensive when your partner brings up a certain topic. That's a learning opportunity. You learn about your own triggers and patterns. Or perhaps you said something that deeply upset the other person. The learning here isn't just about regretting the words. but understanding the impact of your communication and how to be more mindful in the future. This is about deconstructing the interaction, much like we discussed previously.
I remember that. We talked about breaking down failures into actionable insights. So, in a relationship context, it would be about understanding the why behind the breakdown, not just the what happened.
Exactly. And it's also about taking responsibility, which ties into conquering the shame monster. In relationships, holding on to shame about our mistakes can be incredibly damaging. If we feel ashamed for saying the wrong thing, we might withdraw, become resentful, or lash out. Forgiveness, both for ourselves and for the other person, is crucial for moving forward.
That makes sense. If I'm constantly beating myself up about a past argument, it's hard to be present and positive in the relationship now. So, we learn from our communication patterns, our triggers, and we practice forgiveness.
And we build resilience. The grit factor translates to not giving up on ourselves when we stumble. We all have personal goals. Maybe it's learning a new skill, improving our health, or becoming more patient. When we fall short, we don't abandon the goal. We adjust our approach. We analyze what prevented us from succeeding this time and try again.
So, if my goal is to meditate for 10 minutes every day and I miss a week, the failure forward approach isn't to say, I'm terrible at this, I'll never meditate. It's to figure out why I missed that week. Was I too busy? Did I forget? Was I unmotivated? And then adapt. Maybe I need to set reminders, start with shorter sessions, or find a meditation buddy.
Precisely. You're not letting the setback define you. You're using it to inform your next steps. This is the essence of personal growth. And think about cultivating an experimental mindset. This is where it truly shines in our personal lives. We can experiment with new ways of communicating with different hobbies, with new personal habits. Not every experiment will be a resounding success, but each one offers valuable data.
I love that framing. It takes the pressure off of needing to be perfect. Instead, we become curious explorers of our own lives and relationships. And sometimes the experiments are about how we navigate conflict. Instead of defaulting to yelling or silence, we could experiment with active listening or taking a timeout to cool down before discussing sensitive topics.
That's a perfect example of the pivot. A pivot isn't a failure. It's an intelligent course correction. If our usual approach to conflict resolution isn't working, we pivot to something else. It's a sign of strength and adaptability.
So, to recap what we've discussed so far for personal growth and relationships, we focus on learning from interactions and personal shortcomings. We deconstruct problems. We practice forgiveness to move past shame. We build our resilience and grit. We embrace an experimental mindset, and we're ready to pivot when needed.
You've got it. And one of the most powerful ways to learn is through stories. Hearing about others who have navigated difficult personal situations, relationship challenges, or growth plateaus can be incredibly inspiring. It reminds us we're not alone in our struggles.
It's fascinating how all these episodes connect, even when we're talking about different contexts. The underlying principles of fail forward fast are so universal.
They really are. Because ultimately, our personal lives and our professional lives aren't entirely separate. How we handle a setback in our career can influence how we approach a challenge in our personal life, and vice versa. A more resilient, self-aware individual tends to be a better partner, friend, and family member. And strong, supportive relationships can be a huge source of strength when we face professional failures.
It's a feedback loop, isn't it? By actively learning from our personal mistakes and focusing on growth, we become better equipped to handle all areas of our life. And by applying the fail forward fast principles, we foster deeper, more authentic connections because we're not afraid to be vulnerable and admit when we're wrong or when we need to learn.
That vulnerability is key. When we can admit to our partner or a friend, I'm messed up here and I want to understand it better, that opens the door for true connection and growth. It shows maturity and a commitment to the relationship. It's a powerful demonstration of the fail forward fast ethos in action.
So, The takeaway for listeners today is to view disagreements, misunderstandings, and personal stumbles not as endpoints, but as valuable data points. Analyze them, learn from them, forgive yourself and others, and use that insight to strengthen your relationships and accelerate your personal development.
Wonderfully put, Lisa. We've seen how embracing failure can lead to professional success. And today we've learned it's just as vital for building meaningful connections and becoming our best selves. Next episode, we'll shift our focus to how we can teach these invaluable lessons to the younger generation. Next episode, teaching children the art of failing well. Welcome back to Fail Forward Fast. Today, we're tackling teaching children the art of failing well.
That's such a vital one, Alex. How do we equip the next generation with a healthy perspective on mistakes from the very start?
The absolute first step is for us, the adults, to model this behavior. Children learn by watching us. When we make a mistake, how do we react? Do we acknowledge it, learn, and move on?
If I'm overly critical of my own mistakes, my child will internalize that judgment.
Precisely. Imagine burning cookies. If you say, "Oh, I'm so terrible at this, I can never get it right," your child hears that. But if you say, "Whoops, next time I'll set the timer earlier. Looks like these are extra crispy," that shows mistakes are recoverable.
So, visible self-compassion and demonstrating learning are key.
We need to normalize failure as an expected part of the learning process. Think about learning to ride a bike. Most children fall multiple times, but it's seen as part of the process. We help them up, and they get back on. We need to extend that same grace to other areas.
That's a perfect analogy. We understand that for physical skills, falling is part of learning. Why is it harder to apply that to academic or social situations?
Often, it's the pressure. We can combat this by creating opportunities for low-stakes experimentation. The emphasis should be on the effort and the learning, not just the outcome.
So, instead of asking, "Did you get an A?" we might say, "What did you learn from that project?"
Exactly. And it's vital to celebrate the process. Did they persevere when a puzzle was tricky? Did they ask for help when stuck? These are valuable lessons in resilience and problem solving. Lisa, can you think of a time you encouraged your child to try something new, even if you suspected they might not excel immediately?
Oh, absolutely. My daughter wanted to learn guitar. The initial strumming was not melodic. There were moments of frustration, and I had to remind myself not to jump in with solutions, but to encourage her to keep practicing. We focused on small wins, like getting a clean sound from a single note.
That's a fantastic example. You highlighted the effort and incremental progress. That's teaching them to fail well, teaching them grit. When children learn this early on, it builds an incredibly strong foundation.
And it sounds like it's about reframing the word failure itself. Instead of a scary, negative endpoint, we can teach them to see it as feedback.
Absolutely. We can introduce phrases like, "This didn't work the way we planned, let's figure out why," or "That was a great attempt. Why don't we try differently next time?" This shifts the narrative from "I failed" to "This approach didn't yield the desired result, so let's revise." This is the heart of the fail forward fast philosophy for kids.
It's about cultivating an experimental mindset, isn't it? Encouraging them to be curious, to explore, and not be afraid of the unknown.
It is. And this often means creating a safe space for that experimentation. The key is that the environment supports trying and learning, not just achieving perfection.
What about when a child experiences disappointment, like not making a team? How do we help them navigate that emotional fallout?
That's where empathy and active listening are critical. Validate their feelings. It's okay to be sad or disappointed. Say, "I can see how much you wanted that, and it's understandable that you're feeling upset." After they feel heard, then you can gently guide them towards reflection. What did you like about the audition process? What skills did you enjoy developing? What other opportunities might be out there?
So, we don't dismiss their feelings, but we help them see beyond the initial sting to find actionable takeaways.
Exactly. And we can help them understand that success often comes after many attempts. Share stories about people who faced significant setbacks before achieving their goals. This shows them that failure isn't a predictor of their ultimate potential. It's just part of the journey.
It's about building resilience, not shielding them from all adversity.
Precisely. Shielding children from all failure can hinder their development. They may become overly anxious about mistakes and lack confidence. By teaching them how to learn from setbacks, we are empowering them with the skills to navigate life's inevitable ups and downs with courage and optimism.
This is so valuable. It reframes our role from simply ensuring success to nurturing strong, resilient individuals who understand that mistakes are stepping stones, not stumbling blocks.
And that's the ultimate goal, isn't it? To raise children who are not afraid to try, who can learn from every experience, and who ultimately fail forward fast throughout their lives. Remember, it starts with our own modeling, normalizing the process, celebrating effort, reframing mistakes as feedback, creating safe spaces for experimentation, and offering empathy and guidance through disappointment. By doing this, we're teaching them about life.
That's a powerful message to end on. Teaching children the art of failing well is one of the greatest gifts we can give them.
It truly is. And that brings us to the end of episode 10. Next episode, we'll be looking at advanced strategies for learning from collective failures. What can we glean from the mistakes of groups, organizations, and even societies?
Looking forward to it.
Join us next time on Fail Forward Fast. Welcome back to Fail Forward Fast. Today, we tackle learning from collective failures.
We've focused on individual mistakes. Now, what about when a whole team or organization fails? How do we learn from that?
Learning from larger failures is crucial for systemic improvements. A group failure can uncover larger, more complex issues than an individual one.
But how do we even start? It feels harder to pinpoint what went wrong when many are involved.
A powerful tool is a blameless postmortem. The goal isn't to punish individuals, but to understand the systemic reasons for the failure.
That sounds challenging. Our instinct is often to find who made a mistake. How do we shift that focus?
It requires a culture of transparency and psychological safety. People must feel safe admitting mistakes without fear of reprisal. Think of a doctor reviewing an error to improve patient care for everyone.
Okay, I get that. So, what key questions are asked in this blameless postmortem?
We focus on the timeline, contributing factors, and impact. What happened? When? What were the immediate and underlying causes? What could have been done differently? And what can be implemented now to prevent recurrence?
And underlying causes could mean poor communication, flawed processes, or insufficient training.
Precisely. It's rarely just one decision. It's often a mix of factors. For instance, a software project might fail due to unclear requirements, rushed testing because of tight deadlines, and poor interdepartmental collaboration.
How do we uncover those deeper issues? People might hesitate to point out flaws in processes.
Leadership is vital. Leaders set the tone by encouraging feedback and demonstrating they listen. Sometimes a neutral facilitator from outside the team can help keep the focus on learning.
So, after the postmortem and identifying issues, what's the next step? How do we ensure learning leads to change?
We create a concrete action plan based on the insights. This plan must define who will do what by when. These actions should be specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound.
And how do we ensure these actions are actually completed?
Accountability and follow-up are key. The plan needs to be visible, progress tracked, and regular check-ins held. The organization must show that these changes are valued, encouraging future engagement.
It sounds like a significant cultural shift, moving from fear to continuous learning.
Absolutely. This applies beyond businesses. Think of societal failures like infrastructure collapses or public health crises. Transparent analysis, understanding systemic causes, and corrective actions are essential, though far more complex.
That's a powerful reminder. Burying mistakes or assigning blame without understanding root causes means we're bound to repeat them.
This connects to episode 2, where we discussed deconstructing individual failure. We asked, why did I make that mistake? Now we ask, why did this system or this group fail, and what factors enabled it?
That connection is so helpful. We've learned to build blocks for individual learning, and now we see how they scale up to organizational improvement. It creates a feedback loop for progress.
A culture embracing this will become more innovative. If people know that experiments can fail, but the learning will improve the next attempt, they're more likely to take calculated risks.
So, to recap, learning from collective failures means moving from individual blame to understanding systemic reasons. We use blameless postmortems to find root causes, create action plans, track progress, and foster a culture where feedback is valued and acted upon.
That's a great summary. Failure, even a large scale, is information rich. When understood and addressed, it's a catalyst for progress, building organizational resilience and driving continuous improvement.
It truly is the essence of failing forward fast, but on a much larger scale.
Indeed. And that brings us to the final episode of our series next time, where we'll discuss integrating this fail forward fast mindset into your life permanently. Next episode, the Perpetual Learner, integrating fail forward fast into your life. Welcome back to the final episode of Fail Forward Fast. I'm Alex.
And I'm Lisa. It's hard to believe we've reached episode 12, but what a journey it's been.
Absolutely, Lisa. Over the past 11 episodes, we've explored failure from every angle. We started by understanding that failure isn't the end, but often a beginning. Then we dove deep into deconstructing what we actually learned from those stumbles.
And who could forget building a solid post-failure action plan and tackling that pesky shame monster and practicing self-forgiveness?
Exactly. We then built up our resilience muscles with the grit factor and drew inspiration from real-life stories of impactful failures.
We encouraged cultivating an experimental mindset, which ties perfectly into the art of the pivot and intelligent course correction.
We then broadened our scope to consider failure's impact on our personal relationships and growth, and crucially, how to teach our children to fail well.
And most recently, we looked at learning from collective failures, understanding that often we can learn even more from the mistakes of groups and organizations.
So, we've built a robust toolkit, haven't we? Now, in this final episode, the big question is, how do we make this a lifelong practice? How do we truly integrate fail forward fast into the fabric of our daily lives and become perpetual learners?
That's the million-dollar question, Alex. It's one thing to understand these concepts intellectually, but it's another to live them day in and day out. So, how do we become perpetual learners?
The key, Lisa, is to shift our perspective. We need to stop seeing failure as a singular, catastrophic event and start recognizing it as an ongoing process. It's not about avoiding failure, but about leaning into the learning that comes from it, and doing so quickly. Think of it like this. Instead of waiting for a giant wave to crash you, you learn to surf smaller waves continuously. Each small stumble is a chance to adjust your balance, to learn about the water, and to get better at riding the next one.
That's a great analogy. So, Becoming a perpetual learner means embracing that constant adjustment, that continuous feedback loop.
Precisely. It's about cultivating an intrinsic motivation to learn and grow rather than just seeking external validation. When we're truly driven to learn, failure becomes not an obstacle, but a signpost. It tells us, hey, this didn't quite work. Let's try something different. It signals that we're pushing boundaries, that we're in the arena of trying and doing.
And how do we foster that intrinsic motivation?
It starts with curiosity. A perpetual learner is inherently curious. They ask why and what if. They're not afraid to explore the unknown because they understand that the unknown is where discovery happens. This ties back to cultivating an experimental mindset. If you're always experimenting, you're naturally going to encounter things that don't work as planned. But if you approach it with curiosity, that outcome becomes data, not defeat.
So, curiosity fuels experimentation, and experimentation naturally leads to things not going as planned, which then feeds the fail forward fast cycle. It all connects.
Exactly. And to keep that cycle going, we need to build habits that support this continuous learning. This means regular reflection. Take time, even just a few minutes each day or week, to think about what you tried, what happened, and what you learned. This could be a journal, a quick mental review before bed, or even a brief chat with a trusted colleague or friend, like we're doing now.
This regular reflection sounds crucial for preventing those lessons from just floating away. It solidifies them.
Absolutely. And it also helps us move beyond simply identifying what went wrong. As we discussed, the true power is in deconstructing the failure. What were the contributing factors? What assumptions did we make? What could we have done differently? A perpetual learner doesn't just observe, they analyze.
And this proactive analysis, instead of reactive dwelling, is what makes it forward fast.
You've got it. Another key habit is embracing vulnerability. Being a perpetual learner means being willing to admit you don't know everything and that you're going to make mistakes. This isn't weakness, it's strength. It's the foundation for genuine growth. When we're vulnerable, we open ourselves up to feedback and new perspectives, which are vital for learning. Remembering to conquer the shame monster is a direct path to vulnerability.
And that vulnerability allows for genuine connection, which was touched upon regarding relationships. When you're open about your stumbles, you create a safer space for others to do the same, fostering a culture of learning.
Precisely. So, to integrate fail forward fast into your life as a perpetual learner, focus on these core elements. First, maintain continuous curiosity. Always ask questions, explore the unknown. Second, engage in mindful experimentation. Be willing to try things, even if you're not sure they'll work. Third, practice regular, honest reflection. Analyze your experiences, both successes and failures. Fourth, cultivate vulnerable openness. Be willing to admit when you don't know and when you make mistakes. And fifth, seek out diverse feedback and perspectives. Learn from others, especially in collective endeavors.
That's a fantastic, actionable summary, Alex. Curiosity, experimentation, reflection, vulnerability, and seeking feedback. These aren't just concepts for a podcast series, they are daily practices.
They are. And the beauty of it is that the more you practice them, the more natural they become. It's like building any skill. The first time you try to ride a bike, it's wobbly and uncertain. But with practice, it becomes second nature. Becoming a perpetual learner is the same. Each feedback loop, each small adjustment, makes you more adept at navigating the inevitable challenges life throws your way.
So, the overarching message is that failure isn't something to be feared or avoided at all costs. It's an inherent part of progress, and by adopting a fail forward fast mindset, we transform our relationship with it. We turn potential roadblocks into stepping stones.
Exactly. You become someone who doesn't just learn from mistakes, but thrives on them. You become resilient, adaptable, and constantly moving forward. This series has been about equipping you with the tools and mindset to do just that. We've walked through the why, the how, and the real world implications.
It feels like we've covered so much ground, from the initial sting of failure to building a lifelong practice of learning. It's not just about surviving failure, but about using it as fuel for innovation, growth, and ultimately, a more fulfilling life.
That's the ultimate goal, isn't it? To harness the power of our missteps and use them to propel us further, faster, and wiser. The journey of learning never truly ends, and by embracing fail forward fast, you're ensuring that every step of that journey is a step forward.
Thank you for joining us on this 12-episode exploration. We hope this series has provided you with valuable insights and practical strategies to navigate your own challenges with confidence and a commitment to continuous growth.
It has been an absolute pleasure to share this journey with you. Remember, failure is not the opposite of success. It's a stepping stone on the path to it. Keep experimenting, keep learning, and keep moving forward.
Thanks for listening to the series.